go to her profile picture. So, Sean, is that a backdrop of your office? What is that in the background?
Nah, it's a fake office. I work out of my house.
There you go.
It answers plenty of questions. I had an office. I think I was telling you I had an office prior to COVID, and I just haven't had any reason to go back. You know?
Yeah.
I kind of miss working with people, but
yeah, that makes sense. So,
like all my paralegals and support staff are remote anyway. They always have been. So,
yeah, that's perfect. Well, you got a good location for what you do. So,
yeah.
So Kate's more familiar. She's in Springfield, so, and used to be up here. So Kim, not so much. She's out in Colorado.
What made you go all the way down to Springfield?
I'm actually from here. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Did you end up going to school over here, Kate, before you moved back down?
Oh, no, my husband's from up there. And I worked for a company up there for a while. So, yeah.
Got it.
All right. Very cool. Very, very cool. So we usually let everybody roll in for a minute or so, and then we're going to get into introductions. The most important introduction, of course, is Sean, who has helped provide the lunches. So not this one, I paid for my own. Anyway, but help provide the lunches for everybody. So Sean Byrne has been the owner of Byrne Law for the last 20 plus years. And aside from being a real estate attorney, has some other interesting things I'll be looking forward to learning more about over a beer at some point. So there's a long story to that. But that all being said, as people are rolling in here, Tony has put Sean's contact information in there. You're looking for a great real estate attorney, that contact information in there. A lot of people are saying hi. For our people that are here, if this is the first time you've done this, this is our monthly lunch and learn. You'll be able to communicate with us through the chat box. As you have questions for the underwriters, you guys can post them. But fortunately, because of your registration, I have a nice long list of questions that I'll be reading from and asking our underwriters. But without further ado, again, thank you, Sean, for helping everybody with their sandwiches. And go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right, let me share my screen real quick. I have a few slides. And I cannot figure out how to put it in presentation mode while we're sharing. So that being said, my name is Sean Byrne. I am the founder and principal of Byrne Law. We're located in Fulton Market. However, we go all over in all of the 5 collar counties. So you ask yourself, wow, this really does not want to work. There we go. Who is Byrne Law? So we were founded in 2002. I have 25 years of experience in the legal field. We're a full service law firm, but we'll just be talking about the real estate services that we offer today. In terms of my background, I'm a former chief legal officer and general counsel for 2 tech companies. That's going to be relevant later on in this conversation. I graduated with honors from John Marshall Law School, where I was law review and moot court. Deep experience in real estate litigation and legal technology. In addition to my law degree, I have a 6 Sigma Green Belt, which is process improvement, waste reduction, which again will become relevant as we talk a little bit about my practice. I also have a project management certification from DePaul University. We are a virtual law firm in the sense that we don't have 17 partners, but I do have vetted partnerships with a number of really well-known law firms across the city, as well as some very unique boutique ones you've not heard of. So if anything is ever above our skis, we have somebody we can immediately get involved to help our clients out. Our team is a very unique one. I have a business model where my mom was a single parent. And so my hiring choices are, it's not just women that I hire, I'll hire men too, but they have to be stay-at-home parents who have a desire to work and actually have some experience in the field. It's worked out really, really well for us. We supplement them with virtual assistants who respond and react in real time to emails from our clients and our referral partners. And then we have a state-of-the-art robot paralegal, which I'll tell you about in a second. So what differentiates us? We are a very rigorous, process-oriented, technology-enabled firm. We were built from the ground up to be in the cloud, and we leverage technology whenever we can. We are probably the most heavily automated law firm you'll ever encounter, but it's thoughtful automation. I'll talk about that in a moment. For example, when we onboard a client, we send them an intake form, and we'll go over the intake form with them, but we send them a calendar link and ask them to schedule something within the first 24 hours of becoming a Byrne Law client. And we will get literally every question you could possibly imagine answered in the front end. So for a sale, as an example, if it's a condo association, people constantly ask, are there dog related restrictions? Are there rental restrictions? And I'm a big fan of making sure that we keep the conversation friendly and amicable throughout the transaction. So I'll actually make the effort to, give some canned answers in terms of seller believes there is a dog restriction. However, it is buyer's responsibility to read, review, and approve all of the homeowners association documents. So it doesn't really create liability for our clients, but it's a friendlier answer than see these documents. As mentioned, we have rigorous processes. They are controlled through a couple of different technology platforms that we've actually got some proprietary intellectual rights into, where we actually got them talking to each other where previously they did not. Not only that, but nobody else, as far as I know, in the country, and I realize this is a bold statement, but uses automation to the degree that we do. We think very much about what the real estate transaction looks for. We've deconstructed it and looked at every component part and figured out where waste in the process was, where we could speed things up by eliminating human interaction and create automation action instead. And we also have AI driving some of our processes. We're very easy to find. On my email signature, there is a link that you can go to schedule an appointment, or at least they will be in the next week or so, as we're switching over to this new system. We've been testing it for the last couple of months. We're super excited about it. And we're looking forward to some articles and cranes about what we're doing. We think it's that revolutionary and game changing. Among the things that Byrne Law does other than real estate is cybersecurity. And I'm very, very sensitive about our clients' privacy as well. So we actually offer secure uploads for our clients. And part of our system is a task management system where they will get initial tasks assigned to them, along with reminders if they're running late on them. And then we see in real time if the client hasn't done it. So we don't have to wait till the last minute to get it done. We'll pick up a phone and we'll call somebody. In terms of the real estate services we offer, pretty much anything you can think of in the real estate space. What I think is most relevant to people on this call are residential real estate purchases and sales. And we handle across the gambit of different types of buildings, whether they're single family homes, condos, townhomes, empty lots, motorhomes, you name it, we've sold it or bought it. In addition to that, we have a pretty extensive landlord-tenant practice. So if you've got clients that are buying investment property, we can sit down with them. There is a charge for this, but we could sit down with them and give them a landlord 101. And then we actually have a subscription service that will remind them when things like, if they're a city of Chicago landlord, as an example, are they holding a security deposit? If they're holding a security deposit, come March 1, it will remind them to send that check for 75 cents to their tenants so that they're not in violation of the CLTO. Foreclosures and short sales, unfortunately, I think are going to become a little bit more extensive in the next few years. So we have experience with those. And then in addition, we have related services where we draft contracts, we do corporate formation and maintenance, real estate disputes and litigation, and then wills and trusts. Our clients and our referral partners really like us. We pride ourselves on having a lot of repeat referral partners and a lot of repeat clients. We look at all of our clients' lifetime value to the firm. So while I think a lot of real estate attorneys will grumble when they get a purchase, we look at it as the gateway to maybe doing a will or a trust for somebody or consulting on an employment issue. And then later on, helping them either sell that property or buy new investment property. And with that, I promised that I would be brief. This is my contact information. I think, as Rich mentioned, it's also found in the chat notes. And we'll be getting the names and numbers of everybody attending this, and we'll be reaching out in the next week or two. And I would really encourage you to have a conversation with us. see what we do different, where our motto is we are different by design. I truly believe we are. And like I said, I think we're doing some really revolutionary things that your clients and your real estate practice would benefit from. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Rich.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Good deal. All right. So we're going to get into introducing, I don't know, Tony, if you could take the PowerPoint down, and or Sean. So one of you guys. Oh, there we go. Ta-da. Very nice. All right. Good deal. Sean, thank you very much. The technology side is very impressive, I think, for agents, just to know that they have that kind of access, and some of the technology that you bring definitely sets you above everybody else. So we do appreciate that.
Well, I think the real estate agents that we work with have been great about over the years telling us all the things that they want from agents and all our attorneys, and all the things that they don't want. And we've been very, very thoughtful about how we've incorporated them into our practice, either through automation or through process. And I think people would be, pleasantly surprised by the level of service that we give.
That's awesome. All right, we're going to get into the introduction of our guests, and those folks that will be, you could stick around if you want with your face.
Oh,
Sean,
I'm
it's up
sticking
to you.
around. I just don't think anybody really wants to look at me.
Fair enough. All right. Kim and Kate are both underwriters for us, but even more so, they're actually middle to senior management underwriters for us. So we're bringing a lot of experience to this call. And you guys have been great. When you registered, we had over 30 questions, not to mention we're going to have questions, allow you guys to ask questions in the chat. So just, if I can, Kim, just let everybody know how long you've been underwriting and where you're based out of, and then we'll turn it over to Kate, let her tell us the same thing.
Sure. Hi, guys. Thanks, Rich. I'm Kim Martin. I'm VP of Underwriting at Cross Country. I've been at Cross Country for 4.5 years, almost 5. I have been underwriting for a long time, unfortunately, 27 years, and started out way when we had subprime mortgages. So of course, those are different days. Now we're heading into some tough times again, but we have a team of underwriters, and I am located in Denver, Colorado, but we have all of our underwriters that work remotely at Cross Country. And Kate is your AVP and actually located in your area. So Kate, take it away.
Yes, my name is Kate Schulten. I am down in Springfield, Illinois. I've been with Cross Country Mortgage about 3 years now, a little over. I have been in banking for about 20 years and in underwriting for at least 10. So yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. All right. We have our first question comes from Juliet Lazar. And it's interesting because I think we didn't talk about your background, but the question is, how can someone start becoming an underwriter?
That is a really great question. I think we all we didn't go to school to become mortgage underwriters. I don't think any of us really went to school to become anything in mortgage. I went to school for journalism, so that's pretty weird. But I started out as a receptionist, moved to processing, and finagled my way into underwriting. Right now, at this time, I think it's really important to realize that we had such an influx of need for underwriters in 2020. And a lot of companies, Cross Country included, took on processors, people who were junior underwriters, and trained them into being conventional underwriters. And for that is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And then as you grow, you get your credentials through FHA, VA, and USDA, then you can move on to underwriting those type of loans. It is all about experience in our field. It's all about the skills that you have and the delegations, because those delegations do follow you. Depending on whatever company you're at, they're always with you. And you do have the unfortunate chance to lose those if you make bad loans. So when you hear that underwriters are being sticklers on something, it's a reason for it, but we all follow guidelines and we all know how tough this market is. So I think that getting into underwriting, it's all about experience, and the step in the door is anything that has to do with mortgage relations.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of underwriters started as processors and kind of gravitated. They became excellent processors and kind of moved into that role. So that's a good question, good answer. Get your foot in the door first, and then you can work your way up to that. Next question comes from Claire Van Horn, which is, how can realtors help buyers to be sure they have all the documentation to facilitate a streamlined process? Well, we talked to the underwriters a little bit before that, and they've deferred that to me. So I will tell you guys this. If you need a checklist, certainly we can provide a checklist of things that are needed that you can provide them. Really, the best way is any of your pre-approved buyers should go through our fast track program. The fast track program is our ability to essentially fully underwrite your pre-approval. So we turn them back over to you, typically subject only to title and appraisal, and we can close in 10 days or less. So that's the best course of action as it relates to having them prepared as best they can be before they go to contract. Robin Monroy wants to know, how does your loan process differ from a processor's process?
Yes, so our process is different in that the processors gather all of the information and we validate it. We make sure that we have our income documented to agency standards, that we're meeting all of our different credit guidelines, that we are making sure that the borrower has sufficient assets to close. So that's our difference from the processor's process.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, the processors seem to gather the information. They do some verification, but you guys essentially make sure that everything is squared away. So that's a good explanation. All right. So Kim had talked about how it's tougher in today's market. So in today's market, what are the big issues that you guys are seeing on files? That was a question from Denise Swatton. What are you seeing? What issues are you seeing as a result of today's market?
Yeah, that's a great question, Denise, because it is tough. Kate and I kind of talk about this on a daily basis. We have so many inconsistencies that come in on files. We know that it's tougher for borrowers at this time. We know that it's tougher for realtors, real estate agents. It's a lot of just making sure that we have everything in order. A lot of the problems that we have coming in relating to inconsistencies are income, employment. As we've changed, right, in our industry since COVID, we know other industries have changed as well. So as people were salaried at one time, now they're not working those 40 hours a week, because of cutbacks or anything like that. The inconsistencies follow those files. And so it's up to us as the underwriters to just put that story together to make sure that it meets guidelines.
And that's an interesting point that you make, because we had this happen during the COVID times where somebody would tell us, hey, I'm making $28 an hour. Great. Our next question that my team's trained to ask is, how many hours a week are you working? Oh, I'm working 40 hours a week. Great. Well, we got the paycheck stubs in and they were working 36 hours a week. And that they had a cutback due to COVID. They were working for a service that parlays into the airline industry. Long story short, those extra 4 hours times both borrowers who are on the same job, it made a big difference in what they can get approved for.
It's impactful.
So it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely important stuff to watch out for. So, Basil Tarabian says, what do you guys love about working with real estate brokers? I think I can take that because essentially underwriters don't talk to real estate brokers. So, and you guys tell me, there is some unwritten rule that I've known about that essentially underwriters don't talk to clients. They don't talk to real estate brokers. In some companies, not ours, but in some companies, they're not even allowed to talk to the loan officers. So tell me a little bit about that unwritten rule about talking to the consumer, I guess, and or the realtor in a transaction.
Well, I can take that a little bit. It's it's always been difficult because as an underwriter, you're making a decision on a loan and you want to just tell the borrower, can you just get me this? Do you have this? The problem becomes is because as a delegated underwriter, as an underwriter making a credit decision on the basis of the company, if you put anything out there to the borrower, you are tied to that. Loan officers are licensed, real estate agents are licensed for that purpose, right? Because they present it in a lawful manner to the consumer, to our borrowers. Underwriters just want to get it done. They just want to know what they can get done. Anything that we put out there could be construed as a possible approval, and we could be held to that, even if something else were to come in that was not approvable. It's not that we don't want to talk to borrowers. I feel like I would like to talk to borrowers. I would love to talk to real estate agents. But when we're talking about specifics on a loan, it becomes a little bit of a tumultuous situation where we just get a little, we have to be very, very cautious about what we say and what we do.
So to that end, you now get to talk to real estate agents. So we have like 50 signed up for this. So this is great. Now we're checking that box for you. All right. This next question came from Barbara Patterson, and she asked the question. It's kind of the same question, and interestingly enough, Driana Spearman, Charles Gordon, they all had the same question. So I imagine this is going to be pretty popular with our realtors on the line here. I'll ask both questions, but essentially it's the same thing. What are the flags you look for throughout the process, and what are the top 3 things that end up declining loans in today's market? I think we answered one is income, but I'll let you guys take the rest of that.
Great question, Barbara. And to Kim's point, a lot of it is inconsistencies in the loan file. So it is making sure that the borrower is working 40 hours a week if they say they're working 40 hours a week. A lot of it too, we're seeing undisclosed debt now. So we're seeing payments on the bank statement to maybe Chase, and there's no Chase account on the credit report. So trying to document everything and make sure that there's nothing out there that we're not accounting for. Let's see, Kim, did that?
So we got income for sure. Undisclosed debt. What would be the third big thing?
I think we had to determine that it was collateral based, not necessarily value, because values are unfortunately set. We can do a little bit with the values of it, but typically with these harder transactions that are coming in, there's something in the background on title, something that may show up that the seller had an issue with, or something that is an encumbrance on title that maybe our investors will not allow, or that the agencies will not allow. I think that that's something that's coming up as we're getting into a more difficult market in looking at different types of properties. More than not, it's a lot of stuff that we have on our escalations all the time.
Excellent. And I want to remind everybody on here that please use the chat to enter your own questions on here as we kind of go through our list. Please go through, enter your own. Let's see here. Okay, we talked about this a little bit. Angela Allen said, is there a formal process for appealing appraisals? Well, the appeal part goes through us. So us meaning me, not necessarily the underwriters. So if the appraisal, a lot of times that appraisal, there's 2 issues you could have in the appraisal. First is obviously it just doesn't frankly appraise. A lot of times that information comes out before the underwriters even see that appraisal. So you guys are put on notice as realtors that this thing didn't appraise, likely long before the underwriters see it. That's the first issue. The second issue could be that Fannie Mae, and maybe Kim or Kay can speak to this, but Fannie Mae may have an issue with the value. Even if the appraiser made the value, they could require additional due diligence, and maybe through that additional due diligence, they've lowered the value. In either one of those cases, you as the realtor on either side, I don't care if it's the selling side or the listing side, a lot of times my selling agents are a hell of a lot better than the listing agents, and they'll step in and provide us comparables that we can send to the appraisal management company that will then be forwarded on to the appraiser. If the appraiser disagrees, we can take those same comps and send it to Ron Wright, who is the head of our appraisal underwriting department, and say, hey, we believe we have enough information here that to overturn this. And then Ron would give us the right to actually go ahead and order another appraisal if necessary. So if we can't get the original appraiser to correct it. And we've had an appraiser on here, if you guys, that was an amazing class. We had Jessica Masad on here last month, and she was talking about, appraising is more art than science, and it really is. So this is a common thing. We're very good at working with our appraisal people to make sure that our values are coming in, if of course they are there. So, all right. So we did have some questions hit the chat. Let's see here. Mari said, so are you saying there's more problems with the seller side than usual? If you're talking about the appraiser, I'm just saying sometimes we do have the listing agents, especially in the last 2 years, they didn't really have a justification for the price. It was, I don't know where it came from. And so when you called them out on it and you said, look, this thing doesn't appraise, where are the comps where are the data that you use to set the sales price in the first place? And it just wasn't there, or they stopped responding or whatever. So I think that's what I was referring to. Let's see here. We do have a new question that came in from Juanita. So you actually look at who a borrower is paying money to on their bank statements. So that's the first question. Go ahead, ladies.
We do. We pay attention to where the money's going to. Again, we just want to make sure that we're including all obligations in the borrower's debt to income ratio. As far as anything else you should know about that would be problematic, we also look for large deposits. So the different agencies require us to document deposits in excess of 50% of the borrower's income for conventional loans, and then anything in excess of 1% of the sales price for government loans.
All right, so let's back up real quick. So if my borrower's income is $4,000 a month, that's net, right? 4,000 net, or is it gross? Okay, it's gross. Okay, good. So if my borrower's income is $4,000 a month gross, and they make a deposit of $3,000, that's going to create a flag, if you will, and need a verification. But if they make a deposit of $1,800, that's not going to create a flag.
Not for an agency loan. That's correct.
And when we refer to agency, guys, we're talking about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So an agency loan. Now on the government side, FHA, we have a lot of people here that do FHA. Go ahead and re-explain that one.
Yes, so anything in excess of 1% of the sales price would need to be verified. So yeah, your sales price of $100,000, we would need to verify anything $1,000 more.
Perfect. So $200,000 purchase price, deposits over $200,000 are going to get the flag, and they're going to be looked at on the bank statement. So I think that's very comprehensive, Juanita. And I will tell you that a lot of loan officers probably don't even know that. So you now are smarter than a lot of loan officers out there. All right, Marisol, let's see what we got. All right, so Marisol Rosas wants to know, for 1099 borrowers, is there a way that they could prepare for the underwriting process? I have my thoughts on that, but and then how far back do underwriters usually look into? I'll let you guys answer that, but I'll if you need me to, I'll throw an opinion out.
You can step in, of course, for sure, Rich. But
yeah.
So for 1099 borrowers, for any employment, which I think is also the next question too, for employment, we look 2 years, right? Agencies require that we evaluate a borrower's past employment for 2 years. You're looking at past, present, and then their future earnings. So with 1099 borrowers, you're looking at what their Schedule C says, and to validate that they have been doing that job for 2 years. 1099 borrowers considered self-employed because they should be claiming that on Schedule C, and that's how we do those calculations. I'll let you take it, Rich. What else did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the only thing, relative to having them prepared, I think the biggest thing is just to make sure they have their tax returns complete. Unfortunately, some of our self-employed people are not real current with their tax returns, so let's make sure they have it. I will get somebody that says, hey, I'm killing it, but I haven't filed a return in 4 years. That's a nightmare for us. So they definitely have to have the returns filed, number one. Number two, I'll comment on the self-employment as it relates to the 2 years. For FHA, absolutely, it's a 2-year hard look back no matter what. Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, though, can give us a pass to only look back 1 year in self-employment to verify income. Typically, the borrower has to be self-employed for more than 5 years. And if they are self-employed for more than 5 years, Fannie and Freddie may allow us not necessarily to consider the 2020 income, which is relevant because that was when COVID was going on. So a lot of businesses were hurt dramatically, especially on the service side with COVID. If they've been around long enough, we can discount that. One last part about that, any monies that they might have received in 2021 that was technically considered income or looks like income, but it was actually some of the government assistance, none of that stuff is counted by us. So if we see it, it's not on there. So all right, so that's it with our questions in the chat so far. Great job, guys. Here we go. Yola wants to know how much time does it take to approve a loan?
So, of course, it depends on the loan type, how much documentation is in there, how many paths and stories we need to kind of fulfill for that. Typically, it takes about an hour to 2 hours to actually do an approval for a file, to work through all of that income, credit, collateral, all of those documentation, all that documentation. Our turn times for underwriting are right now 24 to 48 hours. So once the processor and the flow with the branch through Rich's branch is done, then it takes our underwriters 24 to 48 hours to review to get that back to the branch.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because I've had a lot of times, whether it's the borrower or the realtor, they think that the minute we receive the document, the condition is cleared. It has to go through the processor. They have to upload it, has to be submitted to the underwriter, and the underwriter has other files there. So depending on their workload and workflow, they may not be able to actually clear that condition for 24 hours, maybe 48, based on these turn times. I will tell you, cross country historically has had the best turn times in the industry, but when you submit those documents, it's not like flipping a light switch. It does need to go through a process. So, all right. So we've got, so Catherine asked a question that's actually on our list, but we're going to go ahead and move that one ahead. How many days before closing do we check buyer's credit again?
So we are actually continually monitoring the borrower's credit to make sure that there's no new credit inquiries, that they didn't go buy a new car, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's a constant monitoring, so that towards the end, if there are inquiries on there, we are going to ask the buyer why these new inquiries are on there. What is not happening is we are not checking their credit score at a later date. All we are doing is monitoring to make sure that the debts that we had on the application in the beginning of the process are the same debts that we are dealing with, that they have at the time of closing.
Hey, Rich, can I add to that really quick?
Sure.
So we do hundreds of real estate closings every year, and it amazes me. And again, I'm a process junkie, right? But it truly amazes me how many mortgage providers don't do that very easy step that you were talking about, and how many clients get into hot water at the end because they opened up a credit card, they took out a loan, they paid off a loan that they shouldn't have paid off. They were going to get paid off at closing instead. So I think it's really good that you guys stay on top of that and communicate with the buyers, many of which are unsophisticated with this sort of thing and really could use coaching.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks, Sean. Matt wants to know, and neither of you guys are underwriting our non-agency product, right?
No.
No. Okay, good. So that's probably a question I could deal with. So, so Matt wants to know, what's the deal with self-employed 1099 loan bank statement loans that some lenders will do? Neither of the underwriters here will do what are considered non-agency loans. Non-agencies meaning that we're not selling those loans to Fannie, Freddie, or Jenny, who underwrites the VA and the FHA. So essentially, those loans are going out into the secondary market / Wall Street / hedge funds, things like that. We do those loans where tax returns wouldn't necessarily be necessary. How are they different from normal loans? One of the big differences is there's really no PMI available on non-agency loans. So traditionally, they're looking for about 20% down because there isn't that other insurance product to help out the lender. upsides or downsides to those loans, Matt? Because the best pricing typically comes from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and Ginnie Mae, or again, which is known as FHA. They're getting the most money in from Wall Street, and so typically it's the best price. When you start getting away from Fannie, Freddie, and Ginnie, and you're starting to go into hedge funds and things like that, the interest rates are definitely not as favorable. So that's one thing. The one thing that I do mention to people quite often is that if their accountant was really aggressive with their tax return, yet they are making money, often the additional cost in the interest rate pales in comparison to what they would owe Uncle Sam if they actually had to show the income to qualify. So yeah, the interest rate might be 2 points higher, let's say. Maybe that amounts to, I don't know, an extra 12,000 in interest, but that's a lot different than paying 40 or 50,000 in state and federal taxes. So they just have to make a decision, do we pay the federal taxes next year when we report, or do we just get into a house? So that's as much as I'll say about that product there. Let's see here. What do we got? This is also a question we have, but since it's popping up in our chat, Kohita asked, how may student loans impact a borrower's ability to get a home loan? Ladies?
It does impact for sure. And it is dependent on what type of loan you're doing, whether you're doing an agency loan or a government loan, what they will account for a payment. So if a borrower has a income-based repayment plan, that's something that we need to know about. That is something that we can account for in these guidelines. But if there's something where the borrower is in a forbearance arrangement or a deferment plan where the credit report is showing zero payments, or they tell you that they cannot make that they're not making any payments, that's something that we still have to account for payments being made unless we can document what those actual payments are. So it is a big question on everybody's mind, right, as we're getting more and more student loan information. But they do have to be accounted for in the debts, in the qualifying debts.
And it's improved. I mean, they used to, a lot of our guidelines that we would operate under used to take 1% of just a static 1%. If we couldn't determine a payment on a credit report, it was 1% or whatever the balances are. We've seen folks with 6-figure student loans. That's a big payment to have to deal with. So those percentages have come down. The guidelines have changed and improved to give us a little bit more flexibility. Yet they are still impactful as far as what somebody can qualify for. Let's see. This is a good one. Kohita also asks, how long would an individual have to wait after filing a bankruptcy to apply for a home? I have my FHA answer, but I'll let you guys answer that.
It does depend on the type of bankruptcy, right? Especially for FHA. For if it's a BK7 or a BK13 for a reorg of their asset or their liabilities. So if they're doing a bankruptcy 13 and you're doing an FHA loan, they have to have a 12-month payment plan so that has been filed. It does not have to be discharged. As for the bankruptcy 7s for government, or I'm sorry, for agency loans, that has to be for 4 years, verifying that has been discharged.
Yeah, so one of the common mistakes that a lot of people say is that in a 13, FHA will lend to somebody who is actively in a Chapter 13. And as Kim had mentioned, that you just have to have 12 months payments and you need the judge's permission. Now, interestingly enough, we just closed one of these 4 months ago. In the past, we had to get the judge's permission before we went to contract. This judge refused to see my client until we went to contract. So if we do have somebody in that scenario, I would just ask that you're writing a 45-day contract, because they will have to take their paperwork into the judge, showing them what the payments are going to be on the specific property that they've got under contract. That's a recent change that I've seen. Kohita also asked, how has the market affected the ability to refinance? I think, and I don't know that that's an underwriting question as much as it's just a market question / rate question. And hopefully I'm answering it properly for you. But, you know, refinances, it's been reported, they're almost non-existent. We are doing some that are what I call situational refinances. Divorce is a situational refinance. You're not refinancing for the benefit of the interest rate. You're refinancing to remove the name of the vacating spouse. So that's a pretty common reason for refinance. Just taking some equity out. Like we just did a refinance earlier in the year. Somebody owed family member money, and that family member needed the money now, and they had the equity because of the appreciation in the last 2 years. It didn't matter that they were going to pay a higher interest rate. They had to give the money back to their family. So there are situational refinances that are still going on today. Let's see here. Oh, that's an interesting question. Catherine Rogers writes, can underwriters change the buyer's interest rate if they have really good credit and the lender did not give them the rate they should have gotten? That's unique.
I love that question. I wish, for sure. Unfortunately, as Rich will tell you, once a rate is locked, it's locked, and I'll let Rich take it from that point. Like, underwriters do not have any capability of changing rates at all.
Yeah, I mean, our underwriters and processors wouldn't know how to lock a rate in the first place as far as that's concerned. That's really the origination side. So, you know, relative to that, the only thing that could possibly improve somebody's rate as they were going in through the transaction is maybe they decided to put a little bit more money down, so it changed the amount of costs that Fannie Mae would want to charge them. Maybe for some reason their credit report did expire and we had to re-pull it, and they had a better credit score, which would put them into a better category. Those things would allow us to make those changes, but those are typically done on the origination side, which is us, the loan officer. So if you guys don't have anything else to add, I'm going to go on to the next one. Okay. So Anita, as a follow-up to our student loan question, said, so is it better to be in an income-driven payment plan or a deferment?
In my personal opinion, it would definitely be income-based or payment plan, because as you hit a deferment and there's no payments that are due or anything of that nature, that's where the percentage that Rich was talking about comes into play. And off of a large balance of a student loan, that's typically, it could be detrimental to the loan. IBRs, though, they are very much more forgiving than an actual percentage, of course, depending on the borrower's situation.
And what loans can I use the income-driven repayment plan versus the flat percentage? FHA, conventional.
So FHA and a Freddie Mac.
Perfect. Yeah, that's an important distinction. So if you're dealing with a lender that doesn't use Freddie Mac, then they're not going to be able to use that lower payment. Not every lender sells to both agencies, which is a really important distinction, especially some of the banks that they just have one lane that they're tied to. So so that's good to know. All right. Let's see here. Are you saying if a person files a Chapter 13, as soon as it is approved, they could purchase a home? I think we cleared that up, Craig, but I'll just restate it. They have to have 12 payments paid on time to the trustee. And then once they have the 12 payments, it is on our end, it'll become a manual underwrite, because the automated underwriting will see the bankruptcy and they'll immediately refer it to a human underwriter, the ladies here. And then we will approve it. Of course, that'll be approved subject to the judge's approval, but we'll give you guys a pre-approval subject to the judge's approval, as long as they've had those 12 on-time payments. It's kind of hard not to have an on-time payment in Chicago because they're all taken out of the paychecks now. So yeah, they pretty much, if they're in the plan, they pretty much have on-time payments. Let's see here. Okay. Kohita wants to know, what are lending guidelines for individuals that currently own a single family income properties and look to purchase multifamily units? what are the debt ratios, credit score, and collateral? So it's a big question. Sorry.
I'll let Kate take it.
Nice.
Yeah. So it depends on the borrower, right? We have to make sure that they are making generally a higher down payment. We have to make sure that their ratios are in line so that they meet a maximum of about 43 to 45% back end debt to income ratio. Credit scores probably have to be a little bit higher to get that AUS approval, the automated underwriting system approval. So we're talking over 640, most likely. And then as far as collateral goes, 1 to 4 family home, we have to make sure that the value is there. And again, we can't go over 4 units in the property.
You may want to also consider that the borrower may need reserves, additional reserves besides their down payment. So they need some cash on hand. And also with regards to collateral, if you're using that rental income as qualifying income, that's something that it takes additional due diligence on our part as well.
So Liseth wanted to know what are the ideal debt to income ratios?
25%. I'm just kidding. No. Usually AUS is very easygoing on 43% and below. When we start getting in between 40 and 43, and you have borrowers that are may have lower credit scores or may have some credit issues, that's where we start to get a little wincy. We kind of are hoping that we're going to get an approval. But 43 is usually the set number that is going to give us an approval.
Claudia Tomlin asks, what is the biggest reason for a last minute loan decline?
So I think the biggest thing that Sean actually even pointed out as well is that it is new debt. As we're monitoring credit, if a borrower goes out and they feel like they're buying a new home and then, oh, I need a new car too, let's do this all at once. That new car payment will throw their debt to income ratio outside of our allowances. And then we're scrambling to find more money down. It just becomes a mess at the end. That is the biggest thing that I definitely see, or that they are short funds to close. That is unfortunately the thing that we condition for, ask for evidence of funds to close, and then something comes in at the last minute where they spent some money somewhere else and now we're short just a little bit, and that takes a little bit of time to solve.
And I will add to that, undisclosed job changes are a big deal. Unfortunately, we try to tell them, hey, if you're going to do something different with your employment, please seek us out first. We are required to verify employment 24 hours before that loan closes. So if anything in that employment has changed, we need to know way ahead of time. So I'll tell my borrowers at application, look, I don't want you to turn down that incredible job offer right now because you're in the middle of this, but tactically there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. So yeah, we had some good questions. Where's Kim's question? So Kim Wicks wants to know what goes into a manual underwrite.
Oh, it is a little more complicated than one that's run through the automated underwriting system. We have additional requirements that we have for credit score. We have to have additional compensating factors. So the borrower has to have reserves. We have to have residual income on those as well. So that gets a little more complicated. And then also with the credit history, there can be no late payments on installment loans in the last 12 months and no more than 2 on installment or mortgages in the last 24. So it is more intense for the borrower for sure.
On FHA, is a verification of rent required?
It is.
Yeah. So on FHA, so you have to be able to verify 12 months rental payment on an FHA to take that manual. So unfortunately, somebody living at home is not going to qualify for manual underwrite, correct?
I believe we can get a letter to verify that there is no rent. But
okay, that's good. That's good. Well, that's good. That's good to know. All right. What else? Claudia wants to know, do we look at medical debt? And if so, how much is too amount, or what amount is okay for medical debt?
Medical collections, I assume, is where Claudia is headed with that. Medical collections are something that we disregard in all instances. Both of the, all of the agencies, right, Jenny, and then our Fannie and Freddie guidelines, they all disregard that, medical collections, even the larger amounts, as long as we can validate that it is medical collection.
Perfect. Yeah, that's the lenders have taken a much better view on medical debt, which is great. If the new debt doesn't affect the borrower of the income factors. Okay. So Juanita wanted to know if the new debt, so we're doing our debt monitoring, new debt pops up, it doesn't change the it doesn't change their ratios over what's acceptable. Is that still an issue?
No, we just have to redo all of our documentation so that we are up to date with our debt to income ratios, and that we provide the final documents, right? The final presentation of the file correctly.
Yeah, and it's in by updating the documents, we have to verify a debt that's not on their credit report. So the borrower is going to have to provide some documentation to us. B, we have to put it on the application. And then C, I've got to take that back through automated underwriting to make sure that file is still approvable with that additional new debt. So there is, it's the sooner we're able to be advised on that, the better. All right. So Tamara Radke wanted to know, what is turnaround time once a file goes in underwriting? We addressed that, 24 to 48 hours. She asked if it varied by company. It's definitely going to vary by company. So, but I've been here 10.5 years because our underwriters are probably the quickest regardless of the volume at hand. Craig Jackson wants to know, we're almost done, ladies, question, because we do have a special presentation I want to do for you guys, where we're talking about some buyer's objections and some slides and things and marketing materials we're going to make available for you. So we're going to close out with 3 questions plus whatever hits the chat. So let's see. Craig Jackson wants to know, are you guys still asking where the money is coming from?
Yep, always.
Always have to know where the down payment's coming from. So if it's been sitting in the bank for 60 days, then I don't care where it's came from. But if it just hit the bank 2 weeks ago, then, and it's over and above what Kate gave us as those minimum deposits, then we need to know. So Joni Bradley Scott wants to know, there was a rumor that maybe the FICO score for mortgages was going to be modified. Has that been done yet? If not, is the new method going to be more favorable to buyers, or is it wait and see? What have you ladies heard?
So there is that averaging allowance that they're letting us use that program. In the last 3, we haven't seen very many of these that I've seen. It has not done the borrower any justice, unfortunately. I think that it can for sure, but the last ones that I have seen, it has not helped out.
So I want to kind of comment on that. So Fannie, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, came out and said that if we have 2 borrowers in Fannie Mae's minimum, their watermark for credit scoring is 620. If we have 2 borrowers and one of them has stellar, insanely great credit, and the other one has that sub 620 credit, they will let you average those scores out to get them underwritten. The challenge we have is that the pricing from the mortgage standpoint is at the worst possible case because it's always considered that 620 number. So I think what Kim was talking about, that, yeah, we may be able to get them approved, but Fannie Mae, their markup on something like that might be 3 or 4 points. And it's really ugly. So now, Joni also might have been talking about there's a new credit model coming, supposedly. It's only been in the works for a decade or something ridiculous. And supposedly that's coming. I know Jim Drusky, who is a guy that we consult with on credit repair, credit restoration, talked about it when we had his class a couple months ago. And he does believe that people's scores are going to go up because this model looks less intensely at collections and things of that nature. So scores should go up. The question is, when will the FHFA, which is the Federal Housing and Finance Authority, adopt that new credit report? That new credit report is created by Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax because they're trying to cut FICO out of their business, because FICO is a separate company that has made billions creating this algorithm of scoring. So, but that hasn't, it's kind of, as you mentioned at the end, Joni, wait and see. So, let's see. Okay, so Nancy Calderon asked if, oh, she did have a question. Would paying off debt put a loan in jeopardy? A great question, actually.
It can, and I'll give you instances of where it has created an issue before, right? If a borrower, if we have allocated that a borrower is going to pay off an IRS debt at close, and we have our payoff for IRS, and then the borrower determines, oh, I have the money, I'm just going to pay it off now. I close tomorrow, big deal. Well, we need evidence that that IRS debt is paid, and that can take quite a while to get from the IRS back because they have to wait for the check to clear or however it's paid. So that's where it's pretty detrimental. Another factor would be, of course, where if they make a payment or they pay off a debt that maybe we've allocated to pay off, and they use funds for cash to close as opposed to anything that may be coming out, then we have to then assess the assets at that point again to make sure that they do have enough cash to close.
Yeah, I mean, that is something, Nancy, you just don't want a client to do without talking to the lender, because sometimes what's factored into the automated underwriting approval is how much money they have in the bank after the closing. So maybe they still have enough to close, but maybe they went from 2 months reserves to no months reserves. And maybe the automated underwriting said, hey, this has now become too risky for us to approve. So it's definitely something, we talk to our buyers at the beginning. Do not move money around. Do not pay things off that we haven't already discussed. Those are big deals, just like job changes and adding new debt. So I'll let you guys, any other things in the chat? Otherwise, I've got one last question, which parlays into my my presentation, which is Lucky wants to know, and Lucky, you know who you are, wants to know, are buy down points automatically added to the customer's estimated rate? I will address that right now. So
I think
ladies,
Lucky needs to identify themselves on camera first. I got
thanks a lot, Sean. He's so lucky he doesn't have to do that. So, but yeah, so we're going to address that right now. Ladies, I thank you. You can hang around for this in case some things come in the chat. I'm going to actually take over with the presentation. Where's my share screen? And we're going to talk about some things that.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, ladies, very much. That's awesome. So hope to be wrapped up in a couple of minutes, maybe 5 or 10, but you guys will really appreciate this. Let's do this animation slideshow from the beginning. Come on, there you go. All right, so you guys right now are dealing with objections from buyers, and the objections are really a couple big things. So we're going to talk about those in a second, but my true feelings is right now we're in a buyer's market. So why are we in a buyer's market? So this is a piece you guys can certainly we'll co-brand it out to you. We'll get it to you. Send me a message the same way you registered or send something in the chat so that I know I can get this piece to you. But 3 months ago, we know that if a buyer needed a seller's credit, there was typically somebody standing right behind them that didn't. And our sellers were basically saying, hey, move aside. I'll deal with the person that doesn't need a closing cost credit. Today, we are seeing closing cost credits written into the contracts. Multiple offers was going on 3 to 4 months ago. Now, today, we're not seeing multiple offers. We're seeing a singular offer where the buyer's paying close to list. Speaking of that, what were we seeing 3 or 4 months ago? Appraisal gap waivers. Yes, something where a buyer said, hey, I don't care what it appraises for. I still want to buy this property. That is out the window. As the August average, by the way, nationwide, the average contract was at about 99.7% of list. Now, that's an important thing to know for your buyers who are coming in and saying, I want to offer 40% off. That's not today's market. We're going to talk about that in a second too. Buyers waiving home inspections. That crap was also pretty predominant 3 or 4 months ago. Today, our buyers are getting the right to their home inspections, which they should. This stuff made me crazy. Last but not least, seller leaseback. A buyer basically having to buy a home, and God, the worst thing, a first-time buyer having to buy a home and then become a landlord because the seller said, hey, I needed another 30 days. Our buyers are able to get into these houses without having to deal with those negotiations. So if you want to know why it's a buyer's market, this is why it's a buyer's market. If you guys like that, we've got a lot more stuff to share with you. Now, let's talk about the objections that you're getting. Some of the objections you're getting is that housing market's going to crash. We don't believe the housing market's going to crash. The reason we don't believe the housing market's going to crash is there isn't enough inventory, period. This actually came from Realtor.com. It talks about the active inventory that's available. Now, when I say active, this little line right here that I pointed to, there's 1 million, 1, 2, whatever that's listed, but not under contract. Available for your buyers to see is 700,000 homes nationwide. And by the way, that's about to crest. Why is it cresting? It's not necessarily cresting because of recession or high rates or any of that. If you'll see these hills and all these peaks, real estate peaks, the amount of listings we have nationwide goes up in the spring and the summer, crests in the fall, goes back down in the winter. By the way, it happens every year. That's the purpose of this chart. We're going to have less listings that are going to be available. It doesn't have to do with the economy as much as seasonality. Now, what happened to my slide there? Sorry about that. I don't know why that did that. So you guys can still see my slide. We have to fix that, Tony. I don't know why that did that. Let me see if I can move this slide. Oh, it goes right to there. Well, that's interesting. Hold on 1 second. I have to. Let's see if I can stop the slideshow. Oh, it's really interesting. I don't know why it did that. Let's do this real quick. And let me see if I can get back to that slide. That was bizarre. That slide that Tony created for me actually went back to the website that I actually got that from. So I apologize, guys. Let's go see if we can fix that really quick. And I will start on that slide. Where's that presentation stuff? And that's this. Oh. Slides for tomorrow. There we go. All right, should be up on my screen in a second. And yeah, we'll get you guys over here. I don't know why that did that. That's really bizarre. All right, so we want to start with that slide and do the share. All right, we're back to sharing the right slide. Ta-da. Okay, and one of the things so you guys can see it, so I can see it. That slideshow. There we go. From the current slide. All right. I apologize, guys. It was very strange. Okay. We've got, so this is the other issue with regards to the housing market, with regards to what was going on in 2008, which your clients are referencing all the time. Like, hey, the housing market's going to crash. We just showed you a chart about the available inventory. By the way, in that chart that started back in 2018, there was a lot more inventory than there is today. You know what else there's a lot more of? There's a lot more people that need a house. As a matter of fact, when we start talking about the number of households nationwide, back in 2007, we had 116 million households that were in the United States. Today, we have 129 million households. There's 14 million more people that are looking for a place to live. Back in 2008, we had 3.2 million listings. Today, we have 1.2, but we really only have 700,000 plus that is actually available to be purchased. So when you start talking about a housing crash, you don't have enough houses to sell to the people that need them. We're not going to see a housing crash. What we are going to see is a correction in appreciation. Appreciation should come down to where the historical norms are at 3 to 5%. So we talked about that. All right, we get through then. So now the slides are working. I was nervous about clicking that button. All right, so, and we're going into a recession, right, guys? We all know we're going into a recession. That's the Fed's job right now, is to, the opposite of inflation is to create a recession, and everybody's convinced we're going to a recession. What happens with housing when we're in a recession? Housing has only come down once in the last 9 recessions. That particular recession was caused by housing. In every other recession, you'll see the line, housing goes up. These gray lines that are in the middle of my chart, that are recessions. In every one of them, housing has gone up. So if somebody says, hey, the recession is going to really take the sales out of housing, wrong answer. Now, historically, interest rates, since 1971, rates, average interest rate is 7.76. Honestly, we're pretty close to that. This chart was probably created before we've had increases, and I think this week's not going to be great for interest rates. However, it's going to be the average. If your client says, hey, rates are too high, I'm waiting for them to go back to 3%, they must be waiting for a global pandemic, a once in a lifetime event. That's when we had 3% rates. The reality is this is the norm. We're just not used to it. Now, how do we address some of this stuff? And I want to talk about what happens to mortgage rates in recessions. Let's see this slide. The last recession, rates went from 3.75 to 2.75. The recession before that, rates went from 6% to 4.875. The recession before that, rates came down about a half. Before that, they came down 11%. You guys get the gist. Recessions are generally good for interest rates. That means the folks today will possibly, likely be able to refinance tomorrow. Now, how do we help them today? If you guys can get a mere 2.5% from the seller, we can use that 2.5% to put it into a buy down program. So now when we ran this chart, we'll change this because I just told you guys rates are probably in the 7s today. But even if a 7% comparison, if I could start somebody off at 5%, they're getting a rate that's 2% under market. How do we facilitate that? You guys, when you're writing your offer, ask for 2.5%. I will tell you this, if you guys are negotiating price and your buyer has a mortgage, you're making a mistake. Negotiate the seller's closing cost credits. And I'm going to tell you why it makes a big difference. Not only are they going to get a rate that's better than they get today, a rate that we all know that they're likely going to be able to refinance, but the money that you're getting for them sits in an escrow account. So if they're able to refinance this 9 months from now, that money that's sitting in the escrow account will get credited toward the balance, and they'll be paying less when they, sorry, the call come in, they'll be paying less. So ultimately it is their money just sitting there to supplement the payment that they're making versus the payment that Wall Street expects. And when they refinance it, whatever's in that money comes off their balance. It's a win-win for them. It's so much better than, let me get out of this share. It's so much better for them than doing a permanent buy down, because if they took money today and did a permanent buy down, if they took that 2.5 points today, we've ran the math. The break even's 5 years from now. Here's the problem. They're going to buy down a rate from 7% to 6.5, 6.3. It's going to take them 5 years to recoup it. We think in the next 9 months, they'll be able to refinance that 6.3 into a better interest rate. Both Fannie and Freddie have predictions of rates in the 5s next year. So this is the kind of stuff that, you know, the objections you're getting is rates. We don't think rates should be an objection. We think there's some education that could be provided. All of these slides that we've actually shown you guys, we can provide to you, we can co-brand to you. This is stuff, these are good talking points. Housing crash, we'll give you those slides. Buyer's market, I'll give you those slides. These are the things that you guys need to know. I've talked to some great agents last month. I was doing a ton of masterminds. We had 56 realtors. over 10 different masterminds. And in those classes, we had agents that knew how to get people to talk to them, but didn't know how to address some of these issues. We hope this has helped you guys. Tomorrow night, we are doing a home buyers Zoom class between 5:30 and 6:30. Tony will probably put a link in there. If you have anybody you're working with that wants to know about home buying, we have that Zoom class. We do have a regular lunch and learn presentation. Let's see here. We do have some questions that came in, so I want to make sure we ask those. Will we be sending out a recording only to you, Kim? So, Tony said we will. Okay, that's fine. Let's see here. Thanks for the information. Residential buyer has to keep an eye on rates or request for refinance. Good question. Does the buyer have to keep an eye on rates and request the refinance at their appropriate time, or will we be monitoring? We will be keeping an eye on that to recommend the time to do that. Tony did put a link in for the home buyers class, and we ran a little bit long, so I really appreciate your time. Ladies, I so much appreciate your time. And again, you got a chance to talk to realtors, right? That was pretty cool. So that was pretty cool. Sean, thank you very much, by the way, for sponsoring. We do appreciate that. There's a lot of happy humans around with their Jimmy John sandwich. So we definitely appreciate that. And thank you guys. If you want to know more, reach out to us, and we look forward to it. Everybody have a great one.
All right, take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.